It is the final week of fall camp here in Charlottesville, Virginia, as we come to you for week 2 of the McCue Report. I'm Dave Koehn, voice of the Cavaliers, joined by Jeff White, Director of News Content. He's back in the saddle after his nice trip to Spain, where you're undergoing undoubtedly some culture shock back here in the United States. And fittingly, so is this football team and this program at some level under a new head coach, Bronco Mendenhall. Last week we talked about offense. This week we'll zero in on the defensive side of things, where unlike the offense, there are still a lot of positions up for grabs.
The offense is much more settled than the defense. There are still positions to be won in the secondary, at linebacker, and maybe even on the line. So, there's some guys you know are going to be there. Dante Wilkins at nose tackle, Micah Kaiser inside linebacker, Quinn Blanding at safety, but there's some variables too.
The other part of the equation too for this defense is learning a whole new defensive scheme in the 3-4 defense versus the 4-3, which this team has played over the recent years. But the reality is that difference may not be quite as stark as a lot of people think, with this defense having an ability to match up not only the opponent, but also the personnel that is currently in place here right now.
Bronco has said that at BYU they were quote-unquote a 3-4 team, but on more than half the snaps, they were in something other than a 3-4. And I think the same was true here last year. It was a 4-3 team with its base scheme, but anyone who saw the team play, they were in sub-packages the whole game. I don't know how often Virginia actually lined up in a traditional 4-3. Coach Mendenhall is very flexible and will adapt his schemes to the personnel he has and the depth he has at certain spots.
Depth has been the buzzword. This is a defense that typically will only turn to roughly 13 to 15 players on that side of the ball in a game. They feel like practice makes permanent, and that means repetitions for the guys that will be playing once the games ultimately arrive. So let's talk a little bit about the specific positions on the defensive line. You mentioned Dante Wilkins in the middle. He is going to be the anchor, and he is a guy that Bronco Mendenhall has said on a number of occasions fits this defense, even though he came from a 4-3.
Yeah, he has been, you've heard nothing but positive things almost from the time the new staff arrived. He's been a rock in the middle. He is a huge part of this team. Andrew Brown is going into his 3rd year. The reviews on him have been very good this spring and this summer, so I think the time would be great for him, to break through and have that big year. You've got Eli Hamback, you've got Stephen Wright competing, you've got Jack Powers, who transferred here from Arizona State this summer. So there's some other people fighting for those spots, and I think defensive end is one of those positions where there's still ongoing battles.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of the newcomers there. We've got some newcomers to the mix at linebacker in addition. However, it's rock steady up the middle, much like the defensive line. When you look at Micah Kaiser and you look at Zach Bradshaw, they are the anchors of that linebacking core. It's the outside spots that are still somewhat in flux.
It's striking when you look at the disparity in experience. Corey Jones is in the mix there. This is a kid who really didn't play competitive football till his senior year of high school. Malcolm Cook has been in the secondary here. He moved to linebacker last season. I think he's never really played much from scrimmage. Chris Peace was a redshirt freshman last year.
A guy like Malcolm Cook, even though he doesn't have the experience, that ability to be versatile, it could be so important. The question is, can he put all that skill to practice once it comes to playing and learning this new defense? Those are some of the storylines we'll look at with the linebacking core. Now as we look to the defensive secondary, again, the theme continues up the middle. Quinn Blanding, you know what you're going to get at safety from him. Kelvin Rainey, big hitter, big physical safety as well. On the outside, you are looking to replace some talent from a season ago, though, however, at cornerback. Juan Thornhill, he did see some time last season, but he's another youthful guy that has tremendous upside. You look at the tape, you've seen him play basketball in all the dunking prowess he has, but he can bring it on the football field. We've seen him bring some of that versatility already.
I think Juan was one of the big positive stories to come out of the spring. He was a guy who played special teams and safety last year. The new staff came in and they moved him to corner. He impressed right away. I think he came out of spring ball as a starter. If he didn't then, he's earned the job since then. So, he's a really big part of this. Big, strong, fast, athletic guy. You noted his basketball skills, which if you haven't seen him, they're worth checking out on YouTube. He can really get up. Tim Harris is a guy who is entering his 4th year in the program. He's had good moments, he's had bad moments. The team really needs him to come through this year. I think he's had a terrific off-season. The coaches are really high on him. Now it's time for him to do it in the games. I think there could be true freshmen playing in the secondary. Bryce Hall is a guy that Bronco Mendenhall named. Kirk Garner is working at the nickel back, and he's a guy who has not played much from scrimmage. Now Chris Sharp is one of the backup safeties, and he redshirted last year. So, Will Wahi is coming off another knee injury. So there are a lot of question marks there. Quinn Blanding is one guy who's not a question mark. I think Kelvin Rainey has come on too. Coach Mendenhall mentioned him the other day and said he basically has gone from the second team to starter. Coming out of the spring, he was a 2, and now he's a 1. So, that bodes well for the defense if Kelvin continues to play well.
There was some news today, and it's at a position that fans seem to have quite a bit of interest in, Mr. White. I know it's one that you've been watching very closely, the quarterback position.
Yeah, while I was gallivanting around Spain with men's basketball, you were attending every second of every practice. You got to see Kurt Benkert. What has he shown you this training camp? He obviously impressed the coaching staff enough that they made him the starter today.
Well, I think one of the things that we noticed when we watched him throughout these last couple of weeks is an ability to stretch a defense. That's something that we have not seen a whole lot of in recent years, is an ability to throw downfield. Now, with Benkert's ability to do that, it changes some of the things you're able to do in shorter possessions. It really changes the way a defense can scheme you, and I think that's one of the things that we noticed about Benkert. The other part, he's not going to be someone who will beat you with raw speed in a sprinting competition, but he does have enough speed to get outside, and the thing that catches your eye is his footwork in the pocket. He seems to have a real feel for when to move, when to throw, but the question is, how quickly will he adapt to this system? We can ask that question for just about everybody on this roster, and certainly he has experience having played in a similar system at East Carolina.
Even though he came here late, he was coming into a system that he was probably more familiar with than either of the other two guys. In my limited viewing of Kurt this summer, the thing that's jumped out at me is his ability to make something happen with his arm. You talk about dual threat quarterbacks who, if a play breaks down, they can make it happen with their feet. I think he can do some of that, but he can make something out of nothing with his arm. I mean, he's got tremendous arm strength. We've seen that in the scrimmages and the practices where it looks like a play is dead. He spots a receiver down the field. He gets the ball to him, and good things happen for the offense.
Yeah, it's one of the many storylines we'll be watching unfold on that season opener, September 3rd at Scott Stadium. It's certainly been a compelling one throughout this fall camp. We'll break down that Richmond game a little bit further next week in our final installment of the McCue Report, but for now, thanks for watching.